Hi everyone, welcome back. It's Dr. Matthew Herdert here again with Centre Chiropractic in Boalsburg, Pennsylvania, just outside State College and Penn State University. And what I want to address today is spiritual psychology, what that means to me and how it's applied in practice here. Over the years, some people have seen on my website that it says I have a master's in spiritual psychology and it had some questions about what that means, and I think that's a really legitimate question, so I want to address that. While I was in medical school, I concurrently earned a master's in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica. And they have a really unique program there. As far as I can tell, it's the only one like it in the world. I think that's further reflected by how many of the class participants each month fly from around the world and around the country to come participate. It's a monthly, once a month over the course of a weekend program over the course of 8 or 9 months. And I know in my year there were several people who flew each month from Europe, there were several people who flew from South America, and dozens from all over the United States. It really is a unique offering. And for the real representation, the real perspective on what spiritual psychology is, I'm going to refer you back to their website because I want you to really hear it from them. In particular, their page with videos. They've done I think a tremendous job recording some really excellent videos that give you about as close a sense of what it's like to experience that program, that curriculum, short of actually being in the program yourself. It's about as close an idea as you're going to get there. So I'll refer you back to them for that. What I'm going to talk about really is my experience and how it relates to practice here. So I've also had a couple people over the years say that spiritual psychology sounds soft to them or new agey or something like that. It's not to say there aren't elements of the program that are in that vein, but I think it's important to speak to how rigorous the program is. The requirements for performance and graduation are very high. There's a tremendous amount of reading. I think it's also best reflected by their state board exam scores. Up until very recently, in addition to the 2-year spiritual psychology program, they also had a 3 to 4 year counseling psychology program that you could take after completing the spiritual psychology program. The purpose of that program was to give people a license in marriage and family therapy. So if they finished that program in good standing and then passed their state's board exam for that, they would become marriage and family therapists. And my understanding was regularly, if not consistently, if not year after year, for the many years that program was offered by them, USM graduates of the counseling psychology program scored in the top 2 or 3% statewide in California. I never really heard anything about the other states, but this is over all the other private schools, over the public schools. So it's a really well-rounded, it's a completely informational and informative and very broad education in its specific area, and the educational standards are really quite rigorous. So it's not to say that some woo-woo stuff doesn't come up, but it's really a high standards program in every way, shape, and form. And they have stopped offering the CP program, which I think is sad for people who want to be marriage and family therapists. But my understanding is that they've really discontinued that program so they could focus all their resources on getting the spiritual psychology program into a virtual format to make it easier for people around the world to really participate in this unique educational opportunity without having to take the time and the money to fly each month out to do it. So that's really the background on that in terms of the sort of external observations about the program and where I'd send you for real information on that. In terms of my education, my experience there and what I got out of it, my less than scientific data set starting that program, I started with about 280, 300 other students. And there were only about 20 or 30 people in that program in the beginning who had any interest in becoming marriage and family therapists or life coaches in any way, shape, or form. The majority of the students who were there were really there for themselves to get more freedom from limitations in consciousness or ingrained instinctual behavior, reactionary kinds of things and circumstances, or just to deepen their effectiveness and freedom and mastery of life. And that really ties into really what I experienced from it. The course includes, amongst a lot of other things, several dozen basic communication skills that helps really everybody who goes through the program become a better listener, a more effective and compassionate communicator. There are more than a dozen counseling therapy techniques that are studied, like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, Gestalt, psychosynthesis. I mean, there are a lot of different techniques that are studied as well. And then you're really demanded by the program to go out and put that stuff, to implement those skills in your life outside the university. The real point, again, in my interpretation, their interest is in giving individuals who participate in the program all the tools and resources they need to become experts at working their own process, to gain more freedom and work through challenges that come up in life. And that level of self-mastery is really one of the things that has not only made me a better son, sibling, parent, husband, more effective community member, a better caregiver in practice than I would have been otherwise, not versus other practitioners. But it's really something that is transmitted in the process when people come in here with physical difficulties. There are many beautiful operating premises held at USM. The two that were most significant for me were, first, that we're all souls having a human experience. It's a recognition that you are a divine being. And the second is that everybody has all the internal resources they need, all the inner resources to really answer any question, deal with any problem, to really deal with any situation or circumstance or challenge that comes up in life. And that's what really relates to my clients here, or you as a potential client. Again, gross generalization here, and this is really not a comment on any specific practitioner. My life experience has been that psychiatry and conventional psychology view you as broken, that there's something fundamentally wrong with you, and their job as a practitioner or a caregiver is to fix that. Whereas life coaching, again, a generalization here, life coaches and psychologists who come more from the spiritual psychology background know that you have all the inner resources you need to effectively deal with any situation. And their job as a practitioner is really as a guide or a facilitator to help you find those answers for yourself, which is much more pragmatic overall, because if you have somebody fix you, it's a very passive process. If you're discovering tools and techniques that work better for you, you can carry those with you for the rest of your life into any kind of circumstance. So again, a generalization there, but how that relates is that in my experience, most physical problems or illnesses are anchored to some degree on the mental and emotional levels. That's not always the case, but very frequently there's a connection there. And some people react to this negatively. They kind of have that, so you have a back problem because you didn't get hugged enough as a kid. They have that kind of response. And I understand where that comes from. If you haven't really seen a lot of this or read the research on it, it may seem like an odd connection to you. But it's not a melodramatic circumstance. Even if you've had low back pain for 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to start to get depressed because of that, or sciatica or something along those lines. It will start to affect you on the mental and emotional levels, and sometimes that brings up old stuff that is in need of healing. Now, there's certainly far more complicated examples of that. My first year in practice, we had a lovely young woman come into the practice as part of the family here, and on her first visit, she shared one of her chronic problems was chronic mid-back pain between the shoulder blades. And she actually said to me on the first visit, she knew that for her, that had to do primarily with the fact that the number one mode of discipline her father used with her growing up was beating her across the back, across that area between the shoulder blades with his belt. And she was also aware, not only that there was a connection there for her, not to say she didn't have anatomic, physiologic stuff going on, but that was part of that. She was also aware that when there were more emotional triggers related to her dad, having had a nasty phone conversation with him, or feeling like she'd been misunderstood by him in some way, or approaching the holidays when she knew she was going to see him more often. When there were more emotional triggers, the physical symptoms increased. She hurt more often, she hurt more intensely, she hurt more frequently. So not everything happens on that level, of course. But if it does happen on that level, it's really important to acknowledge that and to look at resources to heal more quickly, more deeply, or really for the last time, or on a more lasting basis. So I also will tell you from personal experience, if you've watched any of the other videos, you probably know by now that I've had juvenile diabetes for almost 40 years. Growing up with that, I know that illness can also be used as a way to protect ourselves from the world, from hurt, from disappointment. Whether it's not applying for that job that you really want because you're afraid you can't do it because of this chronic low back problem you've had. Or in my family, it was, you can't do marathons, you can't do triathlons because you're a diabetic. It's a very common psychological mechanism for people to use a physical ailment to protect themselves from putting themselves in a risky position where they might face disappointment. It is a lot easier and safer and more manageable to choose to disappoint yourself early on by saying, I can't do that, where you feel like you have a sense of control over how and when you get disappointed, versus really opening your heart and risking and putting yourself out there in the world, and then the fear of getting disappointed somewhere down the line with that in a way that some part of your consciousness thinks you won't be able to survive, that it'll be crushing to you. So sometimes physical issues are just physical issues. That's absolutely the case. But if you're somebody who has a learning orientation to life, you're going to want to try and take the opportunity to learn whatever you can from that, even if it's, oh, I really should bend with my knees, not my low back. A lot of times these things are rooted deeply in other levels, and that's where the real opportunity comes in with the spiritual psychology program and the experience I have working with people on these other levels. There is definitely a connection there. I've seen it in practice. It's well established in the research. Most medical doctors write about it. Dean Ornish and Deepak Chopra and Bernie Siegel, all these guys write about this now these days. So that's the overview there. Again, if you really want the word on spiritual psychology, go check out the USM website. In the meantime, if you have questions or comments about what I've shared, my personal experience, or how this works for me in practice, just go ahead and post your questions below this video. I will check back from time to time and do my best to answer those. In the meantime, you can wander around the website. You can subscribe to our blog, in which I also frequently talk about mental emotional health. You can subscribe or sign up to our free new email newsletter. I also talk about a lot of this stuff in the email newsletter. Or you can just call me or email me for a free, no cost, no obligation consultation. Or you can just go ahead and call our awesome staff at 466-2000 to set up your first appointment. Whether you're in pain and you're trying to get out of it, or whether you have a wellness approach to life and you just want to try and avoid it before it happens, either way, you'll be glad you did. So thanks very much for your time today, and blessings to you and yours.